Hey, everybody. Welcome to page 158. We have three great people here, and we're look at our TikTok video from today because we're going to be talking about the 2000s in Brooklyn and the music scene with some very famous people here. David Menconi, Kelly Crisp, and the one and only David Goodwillie. David Menconi was a music critic and arts reporter at the News and Observer in Raleigh from 1991 to 2019. He has also written for Rolling Stone, no big deal, Spin, Billboard, New York, Times, and Salon.com. His next book will be a history of North Carolina music for UNC Press called Step It Up and Go. And then we have Kelly Crisp, who is fascinating too. You live in New York City, and you can see the bars in the window behind there, and you can open your windows, which is great. Yeah. And you live in upstate New York. You write about trauma, women, and violence. She is a writer for Rolling Stone and is working on several book projects. She's best known in these parts as a member of the indie band, the Rosebuds. Woo!
Yay!
Hi!
Hey. And David Goodwillie is the author of the novel American Subversive.
Subversive.
I feel like it's a Monday. It's not. A New York Times notable book of the year, and the memoir seemed like a good idea at the time. Goodwillie has written for the New York Times, New York Magazine, and Newsweek, among other publications. He has also been drafted to play professional baseball, ping pong. I'm lying. He's worked as a private investigator and was an expert at Sotheby's auction house. I can see that. A graduate of Kenyon College, he lives in Brooklyn, and we are here to discuss his just released book, Kings County. So I have read that book. I love this book, and I'm fascinated by it. So David, and Kelly, thank you so much for joining us. We have a button on the bottom if you want to buy the book. We do have some book plates that are signed by David Goodwillie that we can send out to you anywhere in the country. And Kelly Crisp just was in California, and tell us about that. Like that, I want to just get out of the way because it's fascinating that you were there.
Get it out of the way.
Not get out of the way. I don't mean it like that, but I'm like, oh, that's
yeah. Are you sure you want? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I was at the sentencing for the Golden State Killer this past week.
No big deal. You and how many other people?
What's that?
You and how many other people?
Just a handful of people, because of social distancing. It wasn't a big crowd, but I was able to. But I was able to be there, which is great because it completed the circuit. From 2 years ago, I went to the arraignment for Joseph DeAngelo, who's the Golden State Killer, now convicted. So, and that's a feature.
And you wrote a great piece for Rolling Stone.
Yeah, exactly. So I wrote a feature about the women, the survivors who lived in Rancho Cordova, which was a neighborhood that he really liked to attack in the 70s. And I was, so I was lucky enough to be able to follow up on that.
Yeah. Fascinating.
Scary.
I can't wait to read your book. I really can't, because you continue Michelle McNamara's story, which sounds fascinating. Yeah. David, tell us about you, because you are like a big deal. I met you at Sugar Magnolia in downtown Wake Forest, and we were talking about Amy Rigby, who works at a bookstore in upstate New York. But tell us what the laureate you are.
Which David?
Which David are you talking?
I'm sorry, I'm pointing to you, Menconi.
I was at the News Observer for 28 years, and finally took my leave because the newspaper industry is melting down, and it just felt like the only decision I had in the matter was when, not if. And I'm hoofing it freelance. I was the Piedmont laureate last year, and one of my laureate programs was with Amy Rigby talking about her book, and that was great, having her play songs and stuff like that. And it was almost like, it was just the greatest thing ever, and wonderful book that everybody should read. So,
yes. Yeah. And the star of the show, David Goodwillie.
Woo!
Tell us about you. You're in New York right now. You have a couple books behind you.
Yeah. I am in Brooklyn as we speak, and the book we're talking about tonight is called Kings County, which is the official name of the borough of Brooklyn, which a lot of people don't know. And even people who live in Brooklyn don't know until they get their first jury summons. And it says report to the Kings County Courthouse, and then you figure out very quickly. Yeah, I mean, we'll get into the book a bit, but I just want to thank you guys at page 158, who we met earlier this spring, and we've stayed in touch all the way through COVID, and been looking forward to doing this event forever. Kelly, I know from New York, and just wonderful musician, which I think probably all of you guys in North Carolina know. But she also went and got her MFA at Columbia, and is now a great writer and working on fiction and nonfiction. I'm so thrilled she could join us. And David, the wall of CDs behind you, I think, speaks volumes about your career. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you. So thank you guys so much. And really looking.
Yes, thank you. All right, David, you have questions?
Well, I thought we were going to maybe start out with David reading a brief passage from his book to kind of set things up.
Sure. Just really quickly, Kings County is a love story about two people who moved to New York kind of from the boonies, I guess, out there in America. One is from the woman in the story is named Audrey, and she's from Cape Canaveral, Florida, and grows up in a trailer park, and she grows up watching rockets and space shuttles fly off into the sky, and dreams of a greater life for herself. She's always loved music, and she moves to Williamsburg at exactly the moment, 2001, 2002, when the indie music scene is taking off in a very specific part of northern Brooklyn, the neighborhoods of Williamsburg, Greenpoint, Bushwick, where it seemed for about 6 or 7 years there that every band in America, with the exception of Kelly's band, was moving to a very specific geographic space and living together and hearing each other playing and playing in each other's bands. And I'm talking about bands like The Strokes and Interpol and TV on the Radio and the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, a band that really a group of bands that really created a movement for a while, a geographic movement that was. I was always living across the river in Manhattan, and I'm not a musician, so I was always kind of an appreciator of the scene and never in it, but I always knew that something special was going on, and I would always want to write about it. The guy in the story is named Theo Gorski. He's from a mill town in Massachusetts called Lawrence, Massachusetts. And he also has dreamed of moving to New York, but for very different reasons. He comes from a family that worked in the same factory for 3 generations. And he's fallen in love with books at a very young age. And he moves to New York to become an editor and to work with books, and finds that he's at the tail end of an industry that's kind of almost non-existent, this literary world, genteel letters. And even if it is still there, he can't break into it because it's still quite patrician. And so these two people meet and fall deeply in love. They're very different. Audrey's kind of a cool girl around town. Theo's shy and awkward, but they fall very deeply in love. Unfortunately, they have pasts that have trailed with them, and that's where the plot of the book comes in, and they're trying to outrun things that aren't so pleasant in those pasts. I'm going to read a page and a half at the very beginning of the book. Audrey is a manager at a very cool indie label, and her best band and her favorite band is called the Westfield Brothers. They're based on a real band called the Felice Brothers from upstate New York, loosely based on them, but based on them nonetheless. And I'm going to read a part about how the Westfield Brothers moved to New York, and it, to me, symbolizes how all kinds of people moved to New York during that time, and still today, during this time, what it takes to make a person move to a city when maybe the neighbor next to them or their best friend doesn't move to that city. And I'm always interested in those New York origin stories. So here's the story of the band in the book. How had they done it? Talent and ambition, sure, but these were New York words, and while they certainly applied to the Westfield Brothers, Audrey attributed their success to something less definable, a kind of urgency born of circumstance. Ben and Arthur Westfield were from Cripplebush, a Hudson Valley hamlet old enough to have traditions and secluded enough to keep them. Their parents were self-taught musicians who for years hosted ramshackle Sunday jamborees on their front porch, bringing old-timers down from the hills, toting instruments from other epochs, dulcimers, lumber horns, clackamores. They looked homemade but sounded otherworldly, and so did the accompanying voices, their mothers among them, above them, enveloping each song with careworn tenderness, the way a clean sheet fell on a bed. That's how Ben had once described it to Audrey. The parties, they were called knockabouts, would last all day. Hymns, folk songs, mountain blues, Half the town showing up most weeks, grilling food, drinking from unlabeled bottles, the aged and infirm propped up in lawn chairs, just watching and listening, the way you did in these rural outposts, for hours, for years. And how could the two young brothers not become a part of it? Not start fiddling and strumming and banging on things, not to learn to play the songs they heard and then start to write some themselves, tough luck stories and outlaw ballads, simple and derivative at first, but less so as time passed. Teenage summers, the two becoming three when they added Easter Woods, their grade school friend, a socially awkward music prodigy from a meth-wrecked home who slept over half the time and then all the time, taking up residence among the instruments in the basement, their self-appointed curator and guardian. They started small, house parties and local festivals. High school became an annoyance and then an afterthought, replaced by the kind of changeless small-time jobs that crushed a person without a sideline, an outlet, a mission. Ben became a bouncer. Arthur worked stints at the municipal dump and in the warmer months reshingled roofs with Easter, until the latter, stone, fell off an A-frame and fractured his skull. But he could still fiddle with a cracked head, and though the roofing concern went bust, the band gigs kept coming. They accepted every invitation, learning through trial and error the tricks of performing live, pedal loops and distortion, movement, stage presence, venturing forth to nearby towns, to neighboring counties, to the forlorn cities of industry, still dotting the North Country landscape. Finally, they headed south to New York, once and then again and again, metal to the magnet, until, like Easter in the basement, the temporary became permanent, and they found themselves subletting a bedbug-ridden, exposed wire work-live space in the barren and not yet fashionable reaches of South Williamsburg, Brooklyn. They arrived, as Audrey had not long before them, at the height of a specific cultural moment, born of the jangly rhythms, retro stylings, and put upon attitudes of a loose cluster of artistic-minded contrarians. These were the muscular years following 9/11, but the young denizens of their particular Brooklyn weren't political activists or aspiring intellectuals. They weren't unified in much at all beyond a loose belief in creative self-expression, but how to channel it. The art world was too insidery, photography too accessible, writing too antisocial, and in the end, too hard. What remained was music, and the sprawling canvas of indie rock, part grunge, part Brit invasion, part disco and hip hop, folk and electronic, fashion and spectacle. It could be stripped down or layered up, and as such was so fragmentarily derivative as to be thoroughly original. The barriers to entry were low, the odds of success, or at least stylish failure, enticingly high, and that was enough. By the first years of the new century, the immigrant neighborhoods of North Brooklyn had cracked open, and beautiful, bedraggled 20-somethings were pouring in. They arrived from that vast American other, dreamy theater majors and art school grads, suburban iconoclasts and Rust Belt misfits, some fully formed but most needing time among similar minds and sensibilities, other people doing weird shit, wearing weird shit, smoking weird shit, busloads of kids who understood firsthand the suffocating lassitude of cultural hegemony and the illogical sameness of everywhere else. Of course, Williamsburg, the ground zero of this non-movement, had its own indigenous codes, and as it happened just then, the prevalent look was exactly congruent to what Ben, Arthur, and Easter already wore: Carhartt jackets and denim cutoffs, work shirts and wife beaters. And while they understood that irony was involved, not everyone, in fact, almost no one hailed from their type of manure-scented nowhere. They never did comprehend or really care about the complex sociological factors that produced that irony. In a world of layered artifice, they were wholly authentic, not that they realized that either.
Right. So, David, tell us a little bit about your New York story. When did you go there, and what took you there?
I moved here. I played baseball a little bit after college, and then moved here in 1995. And always wanted to be a writer, but had no idea. My parents, no one in my family was in the arts, and I had no idea how to get into writing. I'd never really written anything. I went to a liberal arts school called Kenyon College, but failed to even become an English major because all the kids there who were going to be the great American novelists were very daunting to me. So I majored in history, never wrote anything, and moved to New York having vague ideas of being a writer. And it took me 10 years to actually write anything. And even then, it was like 2 terrible short stories that I couldn't even read myself. During those 10 years, I bopped around a great deal, and I had a lot of weird jobs. I was a private investigator. I worked at a Sotheby's auction house. I rode the dot-com boom up and down. And I turned 30, and I kind of looked around, and I said, well, other people are writing, other people are playing music, other people are painting their paintings. Like, why can't I do this? And so I didn't have the confidence to write a novel, but I thought I could write a memoir. And it was kind of in this mid-2000s, the golden age of people being able to write memoirs all of a sudden. You didn't have to be a celebrity or a famous person. You could, kind of the Dave Eggers idea of just writing about anything you want, as long as it's good writing and as long as it's an interesting story and as long as it's true. So I wrote a memoir called Seemed Like a Good Idea at the Time, which I got published actually by Algonquin Books in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, which is a fantastic publisher. And all of a sudden I was a writer. And then I was like, okay, well, I've done it once, I guess I can do it again. And I decided, the novel is the gold standard if you want to be a literary writer. And so I wrote a second book called American Subversive. I tend to write stuff about stuff that bothers me in real life. And I know that sounds simplistic, but it's very true. An American Subversive I wrote in 2007, 2008, 2009. And it's about a group of kind of political radicals, lefties, and kind of set in contemporary America, but harkening back to the old Weather Underground, or kind of leftist, the kind of leftist radicals we don't really have anymore, except for more recently Black Lives Matter, maybe. And then I wrote my political book, and then I wanted to write about love, and kind of love in the disjointed kind of attention span derived country we're in, and what does that mean, and what the relationships look like, and especially in a place like New York City. And so that's what Kings County really is. It's a love story, and I wanted to write a very character-driven story because my previous book had been quite plotty, and I always want to write something quite different each time. I think that's a very good definition of a literary writer. And so I set out to write a very character-driven book. I had no idea what the ending would be when I started, but I had a very strong sense of who these two characters were, Audrey Benton and Theo Gorski, and how they moved through the world and how they would move through the world together. And the plot came. I know that it's kind of a cliche to say, write the characters and don't worry, let them define the plot themselves a bit, but that's very much what happened with this book. And what comes with experience, I guess, in writing, it's my third book, is that I don't worry as much as I would have as if it was my first book about figuring out an ending, about, seeing the whole book at once, because if you do that, it can be really tough to get through it. And so I didn't, and I let the book develop quite naturally. It took a long time to write. It took 7 years to write and edit and publish and get published, but I know, right? And but I love it. I think it's my best book, and I always like to write on that razor edge of very literary, character-driven fiction, but with plot. I want people turning pages. I'm not a kind of Lydia Davis type writer where it's all about the writing. And I want those two to play off each other quite a bit, and that's definitely what I set out to do with this book.
Briefly, I don't want this to be a big digression, but before we move on, summarize the baseball. You got drafted?
I did.
I didn't know this.
I went to. I figure with this group, there's going to be a lot of serial killers, baseball, whatever. It's going to go all over the place. I did. I went to Kenyon College, which is a Division III school. I was very good in college as the captain of the team. I did a bunch of tryouts for major league teams. The first chapter of my memoir is about trying out for the Cincinnati Reds. Did not go well. I actually got drafted into the Frontier League, which is a Midwestern A-ball league. I did not last long, sadly. And I tried to hang on for a while, but the difference between college and the pros is massive. And you switch from aluminum bats to wooden bats, and all the Latin guys show up who are incredible, and all the stuff that's not there in Division III baseball. But I still love the sport a lot, but and I play fast pitch here in New York with a bunch of people. But yeah, it's weird. I don't even write about sports very much. It seems very much like a time capsule in the past.
Yeah. So Kelly, you didn't move to New York as a musician, but a writer. But tell us a little bit about what it was like going up to play in New York. with rosebuds. I mean, it's there's that whole thing, that image in popular culture. If you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. Was it just another gig, or was there more pressure when you went up there, or what was it like?
Well, I mean, weirdly, we had a plan to move to New York in
Really?
2001. Well, it was sort of are we going to move to, what should we do? We just started the band, and we were recording like a demo. It was basically like a 4-track demo and 5 songs. And we thought, like, well, my thinking was, I like this. I think somebody else will like it too. Like, maybe we'll just go, try to get a label and try to be a real band. And so, yeah, we did think about moving to New York for that. I also was just getting out of grad school the first time for literature. So at UNC Wilmington. So I wanted to go to New York anyway, because I wanted to write for Saturday Night Live or any kind of cool TV show. And I'd written my thesis in political commentary on late night television. And so I was really aware.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Cool.
So I was just been, and in 2001, it was like a big time. 47% of Americans under 30, I think, got all of their news from late night comedy at that time.
Yeah, The Daily Show. Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and shows like Saturday Night Live, I remember just being really just hilarious. Their versions on that election, that their characters are just so good. You remember Will Ferrell was Bush, and anyway.
Oh yeah. Uh-huh.
Yeah. So I thought, well, that's what I want to do. But then we accidentally had suddenly 5 really good songs. And I asked my bandmate, Ivan, well, what's your like biggest dream? If you could be on any label in the world, what would you want to be on? And he said he'd like to be on Merge Records. So I guess the idea of moving to New York would be to try to become a part of something and bigger and maybe find success. And a label that would be, like the Tops, right? But the label that we really adored was in North Carolina. So we sent our demo to them and got signed right away. It was so naive because, I literally sent them a CD in the mail with like a hand-drawn cover. And they did. It's so embarrassing. But it worked. So nothing's too crazy to work, it turns out.
It's interesting. The whole kind of conceit of the music part of my book is that everyone wants to move to New York because they're going to find the labels, they're going to find other musicians, they're going to find the community, especially in music and but in writing too, right? All the agents are here, all the publishers are here, all the literary magazines used to be here when there were literary magazines. And you very much, and I know Kelly from New York a bit, and I know the Rosebuds, I love the Rosebuds. And I realized as I was thinking about this, doing this event, that Kelly would be the perfect person because she actually had a ton of success not moving to New York and playing music. And part of it is probably the circumstance of having a very special label in a special place that had its own.
Yeah, absolutely. This is my problem. I really wanted to move to New York, but we couldn't afford it suddenly because we had to tour. And my life shifted into, well, we need to be able to just just wait tables, live somewhere cheap, be close to the interstates and go on tour. Yeah. And it happened really, really fast. So yeah, I didn't get to New York until 2007, 9, something like that. And I moved straight into Greenpoint, which is your neighborhood where your novel is set.
Yeah.
So weirdly, this group right here, David Menconi, is my my world in North Carolina music was like, oh God, I hope David Menconi says something good about us. And so I was so focused on trying to build the band into a successful operation that it took a while to get to New York. But then, David, I met you and a bunch of other writers, and it was just so much fun. I got immediately taken into a group. Really, it was like being in a band of writers here. So This is my two. This is actually my two worlds.
Right.
Right here on this little tiny screen.
Wow. Very cool. And I remember when we met you. It was many years ago. You loved talking about writing, and you didn't like talking about music, and it was almost like you in your mind you had made this shift to become a writer, and you've been doing music for a decade, like you were kind of over that for a while. I've always found, and we talked about this a bit, I always found that there's this weird kind of merging of writers and music. It seems to me more and more musicians are writing books and kind of getting into the writing world. And I know a lot of writers have always wished they could be musicians, but a lot of us don't have that kind of talent. But it's this, obviously you're working with words as a musician too, but it's this very interesting, all the musicians I know are either very literary or actually writing books as well. I don't know if you found that as well.
I'm trying to think of if I've seen it the other way around often. Have you guys seen it? I do know that a lot of yes, so musicians become writers, literary writers.
Yeah.
And I think that there's like a real meditative, at least in my experience, there's a meditative state that you kind of fall into when you're on tour and very alone. I was very lonely on tour all the time. And so it was like a thing to entertain myself. And I mean, this is not, now I would just be looking at, social media or Twitter or whatever. But at that time, it was only just writing. I only had that. That was the only thing available to me. I didn't have a cell phone or anything like that for a really long time. I mean, I was so late to getting anything.
Right. So even then, were you thinking of writing fiction? Like
always, yeah. I just loved literature, and so my first, so I was an English major, and I loved literature. I didn't think of myself as a writer as much as I thought I just love reading.
Yeah.
So I think by the time you met me, I was probably still the same person. I'd just been in the band a long time and hadn't been fully aware of what it was. So if you were to ask me a question about, like, what's it like being in a band? I honestly don't know, because it's such an abstraction. It's like, what's it like being a writer? Well, I know exactly what that's like, because it's a lot of spending a lot of time in solitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're able to write fiction on the road. Were you able to write songs on the road too while you were touring? Yeah.
Lyrics. I mean, yeah. I mean, if I was writing in my journal, I was usually writing fiction that would turn into lyrics, or we would call, I mean, I have, so many volumes of handwritten, I would call them journals, but we lifted a lot of lyrics for the Rosebuds out of those. And I mean, I'll probably do something with them one day. They're just a really honest, probably raw take of everything that was going on all the time.
Right.
Including some fiction in there too. So there are some short stories and things like that, but then also a lot of travel writing that I would probably cringe to look at now.
Right. You think I have some questions about writing. Do you think you clearly didn't feel like you had to be in New York to be a musician? Do you feel like you have to be in New York to be a writer?
No, not at all. I love it here. My peer group is here now for writing because, I went to grad school, but suddenly because of 2020, everyone's everywhere. So my peer group is everywhere because I get to hang out with all of my friends have, left New York, it seems like, but I talk to them more than ever.
Yeah.
Now that we're, doing this, we're doing this all the time.
Yeah.
And my writing partners, I still maintain like close connections with my writing partners, and every day we text each other about corrections and things like that. Just very, very engaged.
Yeah.
How do you feel? Because you've been a writer this whole time in New York, and
I feel it's a very, music is probably like this too still. It's a very it's a very people-centric industry still. And in New York, like I met my agent at a bar in New York. I meet people all the time at dinners that kind of, I'm like, oh, that person's an editor at this magazine. A year later, I'll be like, oh, did I have their email from that night? And it's still very much that kind of world, the literary world, New York's huge, but the literary world is small enough that those human connections really help, I think, a lot. And obviously there's nothing more, you got to do the work yourself. Like there's nothing more individual than writing a book or writing short stories or writing articles. I mean, it's all on your shoulders as one person, but it does help once you've written something to help place it and to help make it a career. I think that helps to be in New York a lot. I don't know, Dave, how do you feel? I mean, because you've been in the music world and the writing world for a long time. Like, do you feel disconnected in North Carolina, or do you feel like basically that world came to you because you stayed in North Carolina?
There just was never a good reason to leave. Everybody was coming through here. The scene is amazing. And always has been, top to bottom. And, you sort of, your audience is the world now. Once the internet kicked in 20 years ago, you just never felt like, wow, if only I could get to the big city, maybe somebody would actually read me. It's kind of the perfect place to be. There are very few jobs that would have been an obvious step up from the one I had in Raleigh. It's a mid-sized paper, but it's just a great place to be. I could have imagined going to a place like Seattle or New York, but the papers I'd get calls from were like Orange County, California. Pardon me, the cat's trying to get into the way here. Or the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, and that just was not appealing. So I stuck around, and it's not coincidentally, it's a great place to raise kids. So,
and how do you feel about Kings County? For me, is a very New York is a character in the book. It's a very geographic book, and I try to go deep in the city. There are chapters where one of the characters is just kind of walking around and trying to figure something out, and the city is alive around him. And especially with that music scene from like 2002 to 2011, say. And I feel like it was, such a strong sense of place in that scene, but I also feel like it ended like pretty rapidly as hip hop kind of exploded and took over as everybody started listening to hip hop, and as music became so digital that you could write it on your computer and you didn't really have to go out to a bar to meet six other guys and girls that might be in a band and talk about it just became much more individualistic. And I'm not sure there's going to be another community like there was in Williamsburg, or like there has been for decades in North Carolina. Like, how do you feel about that?
You're right. I mean, the community is virtual and online now, and it's kind of every place. Wherever you can be every place now, and there just isn't any reason to move to the big city. It feels like that's a real archaic kind of. People still do it. There's still reasons to do it, but you can really make a good case for staying where you are, standing your ground, and becoming rooted in something else.
Yeah.
The upside of having been in North Carolina for 30 years is I got some pretty deep connections, pretty good handle on about 100 years of music history.
Right. Huh.
Yeah.
So good question.
Every time I read, and I was just reading your newest book, it's like every time I read something about North Carolina music, I learn about new artists that blow me away. That our history in North Carolina is so deep and rich that it would have been impossible for me to know that just growing up on a remote, dirt road in the South in Fayetteville, like I did. I knew more about hip hop than I did about North Carolina music.
So much of which is hip hop, as it turns out. Is Fayetteville where you?
For me, a lot of music that I like right now out of North Carolina is hip hop.
Right.
Who do you like from down here right now? Just curious.
I love J. Cole, and all of his collaborations are really good, and I like a lot of the I like the Baby, and trying to think of who am I missing? There's somebody. I'll send you my playlist.
Rhapsody. Did you mention her?
Yeah. No, I hold on. Let me open my thing. But anyway, I think that there. I should send this playlist to you so you can tell me who else that I would really like, because I'm just now getting into it. I didn't realize I've been gone for a few years. So I need more North Carolina music, but my way in right now is rap music, hip hop.
Right. And by the way, we haven't really talked. David, your book is so beautiful and so like historically like researched, and it just covers so much ground in terms of different types of music and different eras. You know, when I got it, I thought it was going to be like the 70s, 80s, 90s, you know, and it just goes all the way back, you know, to the early part of the century. And it's just an absolutely beautiful book. And I'm really, I'm glad I got to read it, and I hope people do buy it when it comes out. It was, it was just something really special, and I'm glad I got to read it. I learned an awful lot. And by the way, if our audience is wondering, those are in fact CDs behind him, which is insane, but also wonderful. And I guess I would expect nothing less, right? Like that's, anyway. So,
thank you very much.
Stu, did these questions on the side, should we?
Hey, there's a few questions people have sent in. There's a question inspired by Kings County. What are some of the other best books about musicians, and what are the best songs about writers or novels?
Best songs about writers, what was that?
Writers or novels.
Oh.
Gosh, Kelly?
Man, I don't know.
Recommendation for another great book about music. It's called Hitless Wonder by a fellow named Joe Astrike. He plays in a band called Watershed and teaches writing at Coastal Carolina University. And they were signed to a major label for about 15 minutes in the 90s. And it's about the best kind of from the trenches indie rock memoir that I've ever read.
I will say David Mitchell's new book, Utopia Avenue, which I'm sure page 150 has.
We have a couple of them.
Is all about a band in the late 60s in London, and it goes deep into music and songwriting. I mean, it's a novel, but it's really cool. And he's if you're a David Mitchell fan, he's kind of a unique writer. He's fantastic.
Daisy Jones and the Six is phenomenal, too.
Kelly,
have you heard of that one?
Yeah. It's the fake oral history. It's a novel,
it is.
But it's like set up like as an oral history, like the Edie Sedgwick book was.
It's a lot of fun.
So John Darnielle from Durham.
Oh yeah.
John Darnielle from Durham is a accomplished writer. Yeah, a novelist. Yes. So I've been excited about that. My Durham family.
And so prolific as both a songwriter and a novelist. It's crazy.
Yeah, absolutely. It has just like a really devoted following for both. He's always been such a literary guy in his music anyway. Right. I think his lyrics are the driving, connector.
Yeah. I think it's
seems like from an outsider perspective, it seems like his fans are connecting so much with his storytelling.
Yeah. I think it's tough to write about music, the actual writing of songs. Like when you're actually writing literature, but trying to write about a character writing songs. And it's, I kind of stayed away from that in Kings County. I felt like it didn't want to you're in the artistic process, right? And I didn't want to fake get into somebody else's artistic process. And especially as a non-musician, I wish I could write songs, but I just can't, I never have. And I felt a bit daunted by trying to do that. I had no problem writing about the band, how a band might work, because a band could work in any way, but actually taking on the persona of a musician, trying to write songs. David Mitchell does that in his new book. I shied away from that a bit in Kings County. So I don't know I know you're writing a novel, Kelly. Would you write about music?
Ooh, in
fiction.
Yes, I would definitely. I would fictionalize. I've lived a few lifetimes in business, honestly. So there's a lot to write, and there's always the decision a writer has to make, and it's a very important one, about what kind of book you're actually writing. You could write a memoir, you could write a loosely a novel loosely based on your life. You could write a novel that's totally just absolutely with made up characters that has nothing to do with your life. You really have to decide before you start writing exactly the voice and the type of book you're going to write, because
you can write the same book in a number of different ways in a way. And it's, I think it's one of the hardest parts is it right in the beginning to figure out what the book is going to be and how it's going to sound in a way.
Did you feel like when you were writing your memoir versus your novel, because for me, it seems like when I'm writing fiction and it's not a hybrid, so it's in no way based on myself as a, I'm not any of the, it's so liberating. It's so exciting to just be completely free to, create and come up with ideas that, things that I would never experience or, lives I would never live. What for you?
For me, it was, I think because I wrote a memoir, and I wrote a memoir. I mean, my book came out in 2006, and memoirs were a hot thing back then, right? Like it was kind of a hot genre that young people could all of a sudden write a memoir as opposed to an autobiography. And the difference would be maybe that a memoir is about an aspect of somebody's life. You can write a memoir about a single relationship or a job or a weekend or anything. And it's not an autobiography of a larger person's life, but it's a fairly like new genre. Like it's only 20 years old, really. Yes, there were, great memoirs before that, but in terms of lots of younger people writing them, it's a pretty new genre. And so I wrote a memoir, and I really both my parents were lawyers, so I was very careful to tell the truth in everything I did, and I fact-checked everything. I sent the book to all the people that were in it, which including my family, which some people were more thrilled than others. And then right before my book was published, James Fry's book got A Million Little Pieces, got completely blown up on Oprah. And it turned out that he had fabricated a lot of the book, and all of a sudden memoirs were under a microscope, and mine was the next one out. And here's another dude writing a memoir about nothing. And so a lot of the press I got for that memoir was actually fact checking the memoir. And it's are all these memoirs full of shit, or is it just this one guy? And luckily I had been very careful with the truth. And that ended up just getting me more publicity for the book, which was a good thing. But after I was done, to answer your question, I was very done. I didn't feel that comfortable going around on a book tour talking about my life and my family and my, people I know in New York. And the last two books I've written have been very, very far away from my real life, characters that I've completely made up, scenes just that are not from, sure, I live in New York and maybe a restaurant I go to or something or is in the book, but it's a world I know, but the actual story and characters are completely made up because I kind of want to operate as far away from my real life as I can, because I think I already did that in the memoir. So, yeah. But every writer is very different in that respect.
I have to say, I really liked that you were so dedicated to getting all the details of where, because Williamsburg in the early the first decade of the 2001 to 2000, what? I don't know.
I mean, my book takes place in 2011, but there are all these flashbacks starting in 2001 that brings you back up to
2002 through, what was the year, 11?
11, yeah.
So I'm thinking of this era anyway, just in Brooklyn and in music, and especially in Williamsburg, Greenpoint area. And I have memories of, all of the places that you reference, going to Enid's and just there being a lot of North Carolina people hanging out at Enid's a lot. And so she would work at Enid's is very authentic.
Yeah.
There was this big high rise going up on the Williamsburg waterfront, and it's
called the Edge. Yeah.
Yeah, and I did it way back in my Instagram. I made fun of that place when it was.
As you should. There's nothing edgy about the Edge, I can tell you. About the edge of the water.
Right, when it was being constructed before it was finished, their signage was "Welcome to the Edge."
Yeah.
Just so stupid.
And throughout my novel, the main character Audrey is obsessed with this stupid it's the only high rise in Williamsburg, or the first one, and she's obsessed with the fact that some real estate idiot is calling it the Edge, and she can't handle it, and she comments on it several times in the book.
And I think that's so funny because I think that your book is one of those it'll be almost the closest thing to memoirs that none of us have written who've lived in that area, right?
Yeah. And then it's funny, and that we think, and everybody kind of who's reading it in their 20s and 30s is thinking about the era I've written the book in, is like what Big Bad Williamsburg was like back in the day. And then I was talking to David last night, and he's like, wait a minute, I was there in like the mid 80s, like kids. That's when it was really bad.
Just old, man.
Yeah.
Right.
David, what's next for you? What are you working on now?
I am starting. I think it's very difficult. I've done a couple books that take place in New York now, and I think I've kind of finished with that for a little while. I also am not that interested in writing about contemporary stuff because politics just seems to seep into everything right now, and it's just and also the world is moving so fast that you write about a technology in a book, and the book doesn't get published for 4 years, and all of a sudden people are like, what's a flip phone? It's just like the world moves very quickly, and it just is tough to like game out like how a book might be received 5 years from now. So I think I'm going to do some historical fiction, and I think I might write about money. I've done my politics book, I've done my love book, and it seems to me that money is the other thing that makes the world go round. I want to write a book about what money does to people over extended period, over generations, kind of thing. It's still very early on, and I kind of think about books in that way. Like I can take one or two words, very loose theme, and build a book from that. So that's kind of what I'm starting to research and think about now. Yeah. And I also tend to I'm also not a writer that like has the next book ready to go. I have so many annoying novelist friends who are like, well, I finished that one. I can't wait to sit down and start the next one tomorrow. And I just can't, I'm just not that kind of writer. It takes me a while to like process and get over the book I've just written and like, start my mind on the next thing. Although we don't live in a world
postpartum depression
anymore. Yeah. So.
And Kelly, what about you? What might we see next from you?
Sorry, I was just looking to see what copyright.
Oh, boy, there's a blast from the past.
Yeah.
Wow.
My own dabblings in fiction, a fictional one-hit wonder for whom mayhem ensues.
When was that from?
So I missed your question. What did you ask?
That book was from 2000 is how old that is.
I want to know how you, I would like to know now or sometime how you researched this.
Wow.
A lot of blood on those tracks. We'll talk about it sometime.
All right.
But I was asking, what you're working on now, what we might see from you next and where.
I'm just trying to get over this hangover from being at a serial killer's sentencing. I mean,
sure.
Can you imagine? Also, plus jet lag. I don't do very. I'm like very sensitive to, I don't know, traveling. So the last couple of days I've just been really down on the whole experience. In general, like, what did I just do? That was so insane. But today I've started thinking, my brain just clicked back in, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I just saw that. That was just something, I mean, I have been stunned so many times writing about these people. I mean, so many unexpected people's lives intersected over this case, not just because they were, victims, survivors, or whatever, but just that this particular criminal was active for over 44 years without ever being caught. It would be like if BTK never tried to have himself, never tried to taunt the police and send. This guy was just a guy with three daughters and a granddaughter, and was just really great at being normal, and also just being like the most savage, diabolical predator that California or maybe the world. I mean, imagine capturing Zodiac right now through familial DNA. That he would that would be nothing. D'Angelo makes Zodiac look like a choir boy. Same with Jack the Ripper. So any kind of evil that you can compare him to is just like, well, I don't know. It's almost pointless. So the stories I've been really drawn to are on the periphery, and they're kind of becoming more central. So the book I'm working on right now is about all of the fascinating people that it took to not just capture him, but to never give up, thinking that he was still alive and that he was still active. And he was. Everybody thinks that he stopped, and I don't believe that. And a lot of my sources have, I have a lot of evidence that he never stopped. It's just not a very easy case to make if you're the state and you need to convict a serial killer right away. So a lot of the research is ongoing, but that's what I'm doing. I'm up to my eyeballs in nightmares.
I bet. I bet.
Wow.
Yeah, and then I was writing a novel before this happened, but sometimes you got to be doing two things.
Yeah.
And also as a writer, you never I think we all have one thing in common, which is we have our ears open to the world, but you never know what's going to kind of come at you and what you want to invest your time in and what you think is an interesting story. And Kelly said, Kelly and I we were talking last night, and Kelly said, I never thought I'd be writing about true crime. How did I become a true crime writer? Mm. And, my answer was Truman Capote a true crime writer before he wrote In Cold Blood? No, of course not. He was writing New York society stuff. And I don't know. It takes that's one thing all writers have in common is you're open to stories. You're open to interesting people, and you're open to these ideas. And I think this is your writing career taking this turn is a great example of that.
Yeah, and it's even weirder because I'm compelled to do it in a way that I also can't understand. It doesn't make any sense. I was teaching fiction at Columbia University, and then I show up in courtroom 61 in Sacramento County for reasons I can't explain, except that I had just been reading I'll Be Gone in the Dark, actually listening to it on audiobook, driving, and it just was so intimate, and I connected so deeply with it. And her story, Michelle McNamara, who's the best-selling author of that book, was already a year dead by at least by the time it was published, because they had to finish her novel.
Right.
And I think we were talking about this last night. You can definitely tell. I'm sure there are probably a lot of true crime. Yeah, and you can tell when she falls off the page. When she's engaged with the page, it's really poetic and beautiful. So I wouldn't say that I think I was inspired because she was a literary writer, to sort of pick up wait a minute, let me pick up a hard copy and look at this piece of evidence that she mentions. And then I was just hooked.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I felt well, I'm going to have to insinuate myself physically in this case somehow. Yeah. And I did.
Wow.
You're saying Truman Capote writing society pieces, nothing could be more different.
Right? It's so weird the way a writing career, and you look at the careers of writers from decades ago, and they're full of those switches back and forth.
Is that so?
Yeah, very much. To novels, to plays, to whatever, to histories of something, to crazy novels, and then back to it's very. Today, I feel like we all think we need to be writing this having this linear group of books that kind of relate to one another, and I just don't think that that's necessarily the case.
It doesn't feel natural. I don't know. David Menconi, your process is writing about music and then writing, so naturally your books about music are an extension of that long career and all of your research and just everything you've absorbed from going to almost every show that's ever been played live.
David, how's your hearing?
What?
You're right. Can you hear me? Because
I've been careful with earplugs over the years, so probably about as good as it could be at this point. But yeah, I probably lost a step or two.
Right.
So with a writer like David Menconi, I was just thinking, there's no way that your interest in when David Goodwillie, when you were just saying that these writers are now it's difficult to keep kind of releasing the same type of novel. I'm almost thinking, I wonder if that's a marketing thing or if it's an agent, conversation that happens. I don't know if it's natural, but David Menconi actually has it. It exists in the natural world for you.
Yeah.
It seems like that you're, such an.
I don't have one overarching interest above anything else though. I don't love and know music the way David does.
Right. So David's books being about music makes so much sense. I wonder what David Menconi, what do you think would happen if you wrote about something else? What would you try?
Oh, geez, I don't know. Matter, antimatter coming together or something.
You like science?
I've actually, it's funny. I've got undergrad minors in science, and I've done like for university alumni magazines a lot of stuff about scientific topics. That's part of the good part about being in a newspaper. You wind up doing a little of everything, and you can usually turn it around quick. So
That's so cool.
Hey,
Yeah.
Sue, are we supposed to? Do you want to? Should we do questions?
I did want to, I'm lagging a little bit, so hopefully everybody can hear me when I'm talking. I do want to mention too, I think that Truman Capote wrote about like society, and then it was an observation on a family. So he was very observant about what society was. So you know what you know, and you know what you're good at. So David writing about music, you writing about what your favorite things were, is incredible, and it's what you know, and that's how you feel it, and then we feel it reading it. So is there a song or any music that you relate to when you're reading your book, when you're writing your books? Any of you? Like, do you have like a certain playlist? Or because I think music can bring you back to the room you were in when you first heard it and loved it, and you can smell it. You can, like, there's so many vivid memories associated with each song. Like Grease for me.
Yeah.
I mean,
I know that I went out to a ton of live music while I was writing the book because I wanted to have that atmosphere in my head,
Yeah.
not necessarily a specific band, although I do like the type of music that I'm writing about in the book. And I happen to live in Greenpoint, which is so like all the music halls are right around here. So I would go out and I would even go by myself sometimes and just absorb like a live show because I knew I was writing that kind of scene the next day, and it really would stick with me and help. And stupid stuff like what's the lighting fixture at North Six or Music Hall of Williamsburg, or like what does the physical space look like? How many people are there? What does it smell like? Where's the bar? Like stuff like how high is the stage from the stuff that like a writer thinks about that might not even make it into the book, but it helps in the writing because it creates the atmosphere where I'm going to be able to write this scene better. So I went and listened to and was very much in my book more than I used to be before I was writing this book, for sure.
I also think like you go to a certain show and you're going to have a certain type of people there, and sometimes it's a complete mix and you're like, wow, this is such a medley of like personalities.
Yeah.
But there are some shows you go and you have the same people, Did you go specifically for those to write when you were writing your book?
Yeah, like I went. You mean to see the people too?
Yeah.
Yeah, very much so. That's what I'm always like looking. I mean, I'm not massively into fashion in my real life, but when I'm writing, I very much like I'm a describer of clothes a bit and a describer of what a person's appearance is a bit. And I think it helps to like put a picture into somebody's mind. I don't want to over describe somebody because, you want to do that fictional thing where you want to let the reader kind of make their own decision on what a person really looks like in their mind a bit. But you want to push them a little bit in a direction, I think, sometimes. You also want to get the era you're writing about correct. So even though like, Williamsburg or, Greenpoint is still hip, it's a hip in a different way than it was 10 years ago or 15 years ago. And the fashions are different. And so sometimes it's actually just internet research too, looking at what a crowd at a show was like in 2004. And it's a very different crowd than today in terms of fashion, in terms of just, I don't know, the whole atmosphere of a show is different. The music is obviously different. And that stuff helped me a lot to get out into the world. I write about, like, I'm not a writer who just likes to sit in a room all day. Like, I like to get out there. And my trouble is that, unfortunately, you do have to sit in the room to write. And so in that way, like, I struggle with that. Whereas a lot of writers love to be in a room alone and have trouble with the outside world. And I'm kind of the inverse of that. So I have no problem getting out there and mixing it up a bit.
Well, both David's and Kelly, do you miss that experience of going to a show right now? Because I know a lot of like Death Cab for Cutie, they're doing a lot of live shows for free and it's awesome. But do you miss being there and like experiencing the energy you receive?
Well, I'll let you guys. Kelly?
Well, the thing I miss, I guess, the most is collaborating with people, just my friends, just going anywhere.
Yeah.
When I moved to New York by myself, it was apart from the band. My first New York experience was with the band, and we just rolled in as a, kind of my whole group already fully signed to a label and everything. So we were just, I think, playing a CMJ festival and all of that. But going to New York City shows as a person was a completely different experience.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't miss, I haven't missed, because I've been on both sides of the stage, right? So being on stage is something I really enjoy. I just like, sometimes I like to just turn it on, but I'm really shy in real life. And so going to a show is really, I'm very shy. So I don't stand or be or like how to be in a room. So I don't miss the social awkward part of shows. I miss hanging out with my friends and being, part of a group doing something together, creating something. But
I get that.
yeah, but I realized today that we really are missing. I mean, so David Goodwillie, you have the scene that's set in Webster Hall, and it's just so, the blocking of it is just so tight, and the woman, Audrey, the character who's moving through the crowd and going to, she notices everything, she sees everything that's happening, and things that she shouldn't see, she sees.
Yeah.
And that's what it's like, kind of managing a show. So for me, I guess I have a little bit different experience because
that scene actually my editor wanted to take out, and I thought it's all one paragraph and it lasts about 5 pages, and it's all one paragraph for a very specific reason. I want the reader to feel that franticness that this manager, that Audrey, who's managing this band, is feeling in the moments before a show. And it's not only that, the show's running late, so there's the crowds wondering what's going on. People are getting pissed off. The band is backstage in a complete mess. Everybody's fighting with each other. The merch girl is stealing the merch. Like, all this shit is happening at once, and she's running around just dealing with it all. The van is getting towed outside. Like, all the stuff that could go wrong, the show's going wrong, but like, she's handling it. And I wanted to create that. It's funny, nobody really talks about that scene ever. It's one of my favorite scenes because it just shows who she is. And you kind of talk about telling versus showing, and it's an old cliche about writing, but that's a scene where you could actually, you're basically, this is who this character is through how she's moving around and doing stuff and dealing with stuff. And it's also I talked to a lot of musicians to try to get that scene right. And I actually went to Webster Hall, and I went backstage at Webster Hall, and I really just tried to like soak it in. I was sitting there taking notes like a little writing geek. Everyone's like, "Why are you taking notes at this show?" And
welcome to my world.
Yeah, except I wasn't getting paid to write an article about it. I was just doing it to try to get the scene right.
You're not writing a tell-all, Kelly, are you?
Yeah, exactly. So,
but I think you did. Like, that was going to be my point, is that my experience of shows sometimes, and my recollection is like that night for her, which was one thing after another, and it was just like constant and a lot.
Yeah. And you just deal with it. Like, you're just
like dealing with everything that's just coming. I mean, it's just everything is it's falling apart constantly or coming together. Yeah. And I don't really miss the managing aspect of managing an evening.
Yeah.
Putting that, but David, do you guys miss live events?
Well, I'll go first just because David is the real expert on this. But I miss shows a ton. Like, I really miss going out. The great part of New York is what's missing now: the theaters, the music, the restaurants, and it'll all come back. It'll come back a bit different, but I miss music a ton. It is like the background soundtrack to my life, is being able to just go to a show, even if you don't know the band really well, which a lot of us do, because in New York the shows are really expensive, and but you can go to cheap shows all the time and free shows all the time as well. And I miss it a ton, especially talking about it now as I am with this book. Like, I realize how much a part of my life it's been, and just being in that room, having a bunch of people like loving the same thing, which we all took for granted for a long time. And reading is great, but reading's a very, and I've read more than I've read ever, I think, in the last 6 months. And, but it's still a very individual thing, and it's a very private thing, and music is not. And that's what I miss about it for sure. How about you, Dave?
Oh yeah, totally. I said at one point in the North Carolina book, during the years that I was at the paper, going to Cat's Cradle was like a city hall reporter going down to the mayor's office. Just everybody was there who you'd need to bump into, and you'd hear things. Not all of it wound up in the paper. A lot of it was fun and funny.
Yeah.
But I missed that tremendously. An earlier question was about what you write to, and songs and things. And I was just going to mention, I find when I'm writing, especially if it's fiction, something soundtracky is the best of all. You don't really get caught up in lyrics. Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. I could listen to that just over and over when I'm on the background when I'm writing, and often do.
Yeah.
So yeah, a lot of Miles Davis lately, and no live music at all. I'm feeling a little out of kilter.
Right.
I hope you get it back.
Well, you certainly have a lot of choices here.
I do.
All right, we have
I'm gonna
about 2 more questions. David Menconi, do you want to ask 2 other questions?
Yeah, I was going to check here. Let's see. For David G., congrats on the high praise and great reviews for Kings County. This is from William English, by the way. Could you comment on how you feel that as a writer you have grown through the process of writing this movie?
Just grown through the process of writing. That's a tough question, because I think you do get a confidence from every book, and but the confidence is that you've been able to write another book, like write a book before. So starting the next book, I know that I will be like, I can't do this. This is ridiculous. It's such a slog. My God, I'm going to be doing this for 3 years or 4 years or 7 years. In an age where everyone has 10-minute attention spans, is it worth it? You go through this whole thing in your head. And then after a while, you calm down and you're like, well, this is actually my profession, and this is what I do. And I've done it now 3 times before. And in that way, my growth as a writer does give me that confidence to kind of shut those other voices up in my head. And it also gives me, like the stuff we talked about earlier, where I don't feel like I need to know what the end of the book is when I start a book. I don't feel like I know how to not put too much pressure on myself writing. And that's the stuff that having done it before helps with. Story-wise, like every book is like starting over, and you just hope that you latch onto a story and characters that you fall in love with, that you want to see through to the end. And luckily, I have every time. It takes me a while sometimes to figure it out, but I always, in the end, find a story and characters that I think are worth seeing through and carrying through.
Sue Lucy asks, the book world is so supportive. Did that surprise you?
Yes and no. I mean, the independent book world is like massively supportive, and you realize that it is an ecosystem where everybody does rely on each other. I mean, booksellers need books to sell. We need an outlet. We need people to be excited about selling the books, which is what Barnes & Noble and Amazon kind of lack. And it, I remember writing to you guys in, March. I was just sitting there, kind of COVID, in upstate, kind of. I actually had COVID, but like I was just kind of getting over it and thinking I had a book coming out, but I don't really have anything to do. And I just remembered meeting you guys a month before and being like, wow, I'd love to get back in touch with you and like say I have this book coming out. It was great to meet you. And it's just kind of a shot in the dark, and maybe they answer and they have 50 other books that week they're worried about. And especially with COVID and the bookstores are half closed and all that stuff. But like sometimes people answer and you create relationships. We're all here because you guys answered my email where I was just like, I love meeting you guys. And that's,
well, you have a Paris narrative too. Like we enjoy talking to you.
Yeah. And that stuff, like you do form relationships that I'm not sure you would in other professions. And it doesn't feel like a fly by night relationship either, because everybody in the book world is used to like stuff taking time. And The books take time. The publicity takes time. Like everything is just work moves a little slower, but in a good way. And people kind of think through stuff. And it is a really supportive community. Most of the people I've met have just been absolutely wonderful. And it goes to the publishing houses too. Like, I've been lucky to have editors who are really editors who edit my work, and I would scream and yell at each other sometimes. But at the end of the day, they're not in it for the money. They're in it to make a book really great, and they're proud of the books they edit and publish as well. And I don't even think my editor's here, so I'm not blowing smoke. It's a lot of very smart people that could be doing something else, and they're not because they love books, and that makes it incredible.
We're readers.
Yeah,
I think readers are more empathetic and kind too, and smart.
Of course, yeah, very much.
We're all together, and we're not gossiping. We're just actually sharing ideas and
Yeah.
the love of books, and we love your book.
Yeah.
So,
well, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Kelly, just briefly, how do you feel about the book industry as opposed to the music industry?
Oh, good
having
question.
done some of both.
I mean, I don't know. I feel like I keep getting lucky. But then again,
there's a reason for that. just telling you, you're good.
So maybe so, but I think that but I keep getting lucky with the people that I connect to and create with. And so, I mean, I just been able to make friends in both worlds in a way that I think is like probably the most rewarding part of it. So like I said earlier, I have writing partners that I went to grad school with, for example, that I will still like every day. We, text each other like, hey, can you look at this sentence fragment, something very small. What's another word that would work here? Same syllable, this kind of thing. And it's just like to support people when they're not. Let me see how should I say this? To support people when they're coming up, I guess, is so important. And to stay supportive of them when they are, successful is, I guess, when you say supportive, I think of the opposite would be competitive. I don't know if that's right. Would you think of competitive? I sometimes see that there are like music scenes or something like that do seem competitive or do seem, or I've heard about that. But in my experience, we just like, the people that I've been surrounded by and have like had musicians, for example, in my band who go on to be wildly more famous than my band. And that's just been wonderful. So there's a question about the Avett brothers on this chat too, and I wonder, like, I don't really know those guys very well, but I think about their success and how big it seems to me. You, David Menconi, you probably know a lot more about that than I do, or how they came up. But I'm always surprised all over the world when I mention Raleigh, people are like, "Oh, Avett brothers." And I'm just
they're remarkably huge, yeah.
Yeah, totally. Yes, the Avett brothers, and I'm just so proud to be from a place that has such a deep music history. And I think that I got lucky again by coming to New York and meeting with the really kind-hearted people who want to. David, you said I wanted to talk about writing all the time, but I feel like that's not true. I just wanted to talk about books.
Yeah. Or what you just didn't want to talk about was music.
Oh, true. Yeah. No, I mean, yeah. So I don't know. I found a good community.
Yeah.
In both places. I found a soft place to land in both places, which is really great for when you're trying to incubate ideas and create art.
Yeah.
Anything else, David Menconi? No.
We seem to have run out of questions that people sent in.
I really can't thank you enough. This has been wonderful and very soul fulfilling. And I am very happy to have met all of you virtually. I can't wait for you all to come into our store and sign our bathroom wall, and we'll have a beer and have some fun. There is a button on the bottom. It says buy the book. If you want, we can send you a signed copy. We're at page 158 Books in Wake Forest, North Carolina, and we love books, we love music, and we love you. So thank you so much for being here. I will see you later. Have a great night.
Thank you, guys. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in.
Everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.